Namaskaram. Welcome back, humanity. Welcome back to the We Are Not Lonely podcast. It's been a while. I've missed you. It's just been a week, but I don't know why I'm acting so dramatic. The thing is, I'm a little late because this weekend was a very important festival. And before you ask me why we have so many festivals, I will get to that in a bit. So, this Saturday was the Solar New Year, which, if you look at it from an astronomical and astrological perspective, it's when the sun moves from Pisces to Aries, as you would call it. We would call it the Mesha Sankramana, the moment that the sun enters Mesha. And that marks the beginning of the solar new year. Now, this isn't the only new year that we celebrate. There are several different communities across India, and it's interesting to note how even far-flung communities from different areas have similar beliefs and similar customs. For example, there is another calendar called the lunar calendar, which is also practiced. In fact, modern the Vaidika consciousness uses a combination of both solar and lunar calendars. It's a lunisolar calendar, if you like to call it that. Yeah, actually, that's the term for it. The one before this, there was another festival called Chairoba and Yugadi. That's the Lunar New Year that happened. That happened quite a while back, actually. When was Yugadi? Yugadi was on the 22nd of March, and the Tamil and Malayali New Year was on the 16th of April. So this is the difference between the lunar and the solar calendar. Sometimes they coincide, sometimes they don't. It goes on like this. Alright, so what happens? So Yugadi is the Lunar New Year, and it's celebrated in Telugu speaking communities, that is Telangana and Andhra Pradesh, as Samvatsaradi, which is the beginning of the new Samvatsara / year. It's celebrated as Yugadi in Karnataka. It's also celebrated as Chairoba in Manipur. Yugadi is related to the moon, and this is related to the sun. Vishu is related to the sun. Now, there are two other very significant festivals that happened before this. One is Makara Sankranti, which happens about 4 months back, sometime in the beginning of Jan. It moves from Sagittarius to Capricorn, and that signifies the end of a particular event called Ayana. It's like half a year. It moves from Dakshinayana to Uttarayana, and this is an interesting phenomenon. It's easily visible in my country, India. If you look at the sun during the months of Dakshinayana, which is all the way from Jan to June, which is when we have sometime in June is when Uttarayana ends and Dakshinayana begins. Karkataka Sankranti, that's when Dakshinayana begins, and that's like half the calendar. I'm rambling a little bit, but there's a reason for all of this, I assume. I think usually it all kind of wraps up towards the end. Now, the thing I wanted to say is that as the new year began, I've actually moved to a new room. I've actually moved to the original room that I occupied when this house was built almost 13 years ago. Damn, it's been a long time. But yeah, so it's a nice big room. I have space for a lot of my things. And I'm here now, and this is the first podcast being recorded in this particular room, and this is one of the reasons the podcast has been delayed. We had a huge gathering of guests at home for Vishu, which is the New Year, the Solar New Year, and I had a few friends over for the Sadhya. We have like a meal. I'm sort of giving away my ethnicity, part of my ethnicity and all of that. It's a Malayali thing, a Keralite tradition to celebrate Vishu and have a nice Malayali meal, Kerala style meal on like banana leaves and all of that. So I had a few friends come home. We enjoyed a really good sadhya together. I caught up with some people who I hadn't seen for months. And when everything was done, it was quite late at night. I came back and I was zonked, right? And Sunday, of course, I had guests. I also ended up being outside the entire time. It was Ekadashi. I'm throwing a lot of words out there. Huh? Ekadashi is the 11th day of every lunar fortnight. It occurs twice in a calendar month. And usually on this particular day, I like to take some time out and fast. It's a really good practice to fast once in a while, deprive your body of nutrients because your body is usually working on overtime. My point being is that it's nice to fast once in a while. It also has some certain spiritual significance. Ekadashi is dedicated to Lord Vishnu, and apparently he likes these kind of penances. Anyway, the point is that a new year is upon us. Changes are coming. And towards the end of this week, there's going to be a huge change, and this is going to happen when Jupiter, the planet Guru, transits from Pisces, where it's been for the last year or so, onto Aries. And this is a very interesting event from a lot of perspectives, especially from an astrological perspective. Now, I understand that a lot of people don't really believe in astrology, and you know what, that's up to you. But I used to be a non-believer too, and I have made my entire journey, I have used Jyotishya to read certain charts, have predicted certain things, you could say. Suffice it to say that I am now convinced of its efficacy. Yeah. So the point is that once Jupiter moves to Mesha, it's going to be, again, like a very new beginning. It's interesting from a lot of perspectives because we had the Lunar New Year, we had the Solar New Year. Mahashivratri happened on somewhere by Feb 19th. That was an amazing night, full of energy. I could feel the winds of change back then itself. But it's not until now, until recently, that I realized, hey, a lot of things are changing. Now, Guru himself, right? He goes around the entire chart. He takes 12 years to transit the entire chart. I think everybody understands it. He returns to the same place. He returns to Aries after 12 years. He's quite a slow-moving planet, which is why he's very significant. The slower-moving planets stay in a particular house for a very long time, and because of that, their effects are more profoundly felt. Now, Guru is moving from his own sign to Aries, which is a sign of a friend, more or less. It's a good sign. One of the main reasons being that he is in a position of... He's in the first house from the Kalapurusha. If you look at it from the perspective of Kalapurusha, now the tradition is that we view Aries as the first house from the Kalapurusha, the universal being, the being of time, and so on and so forth. That's the first house. So in many ways, this year is going to be a trendsetter. Certain things are happening, certain vibrations. I hate using that word recently because I've seen certain people make this mockery of it. And so I'm reluctant to use it myself. Anyway, just suffice it to say that things are changing, man. And I want to bring your attention to that particular fact. It's very subtle, but you will look back in a few years to this particular time, to this particular year, and realize, oh, this is probably where it all started. And next year is going to be an interesting year, numerologically and a bunch of other things aside. But I'm really waiting for next year. It's going to be a lot of fun. Life is going to be getting very interesting in the coming years, and I, for one, am very glad to be here, despite all of the negativity that's been happening in the past 1 month. It's just that you have to understand that it's all happening for a reason. And usually the reason is to teach you something good is going to come. I mean, the point of suffering is to become self-realized. If you don't, then there's no point to suffering itself. Okay, I don't know where I went with that entire topic, man. It's just like one revelation after another, I guess. Now, I promised on Instagram a few days back, I wrote this beautiful little poem. Let me read it out to you. You know what? Let's do that, yeah. It's also on my blog, which I do have. For those of you who are wondering why I have a blog and why I haven't really mentioned it before, well, what happened was during my entire sojourn in Hyderabad, I disappeared for a bit, right? I disappeared for like 3 to 4 months. What I was doing was I was in Hyderabad, I was teaching martial arts. I've made an entire video about it. You can probably go check that out too. I realized I really like keeping creative things happening. I like to keep the creative juices flowing, if you know what I mean. So why do I make that sound so dirty, dude? That's me. That's what I do. Anyway, so that's when I realized I really like blogging. I really like writing things, and I'm doing my best to keep that going. I recently put out this, I like to call it a beautiful poem, right? It's called Revelations Number One, brackets poetry. I will link it in the description. So the poem begins. Revelations Number One, written by Rudra. A great darkness will descend upon us, a world to mend. It will spread like fire in dry grass, driven by greed, anger, and lust. We will hear the clarion call. The day you fear will soon be upon us all. Come now, hearken, the angels sing, glory to the newborn King. The horsemen are in motion. Do you hear their thundering hooves? Listen close, pay attention to the signs of our liberation. Darkness against light, an eternal war. Let truth shine bright and falsehoods be abhorred. The end is near, but so is the beginning. Judgment is close, dear. Stop sinning. I'm not gonna. That was pretty intense, if I do say so myself. It's been a while since I wrote poetry. I used to be quite the poet in my youth. I used to pen these letters of impassioned love to my crush at the time. she probably, uh, she probably knows. I've lost most of them. It was very weird. Back when I was in 8th standard, my friend would get me food. He would pay me with food. He would commission pieces of poetry, and I would read Shakespeare for inspiration, and I would write them down. I would pen down these lovely letters of lust. That was beautiful, lovely letters of lust. God, what alliteration. Beautiful. Genius. God, your voice. Sorry about that. I tend to do this once in a while. Yeah. So back in the day, I used to write poetry a lot, mostly because I was moved and I didn't quite know how to set words to music yet. But as I learned to write songs, I started writing songs. It's not like I'm a master at that too. I've written quite a few in the past few years though, and I'm trying to put it all together though. And this is where I should mention the fact that I regret not being so organized in the past. Because recently I've started to realize that due to my lack of, due to the complete lack of planning, of preparation, all of my songs are piecemeal in different places, man. It's annoying. I finally found some of them. I've recorded a great deal of them on my tab. Like inspiration strikes, I pick up my guitar and I just strum and I write it down immediately as well. But now I've realized that all of my songs are in different places and I'm trying to collate all of them together. And recently I found one of the books where I had written quite a few songs. I found like 4 songs in there, which is like, whoa, I was disorganized. I did not know this. But this organization came up much later. Even then, it's not as organized as I would like to be. I have multiple books for multiple things, and this is the whole journey of getting back into the productive process, into being that massive productive machine again. And that's what I've been working on, getting my shit together. And I've been working on getting my shit together, basically. What happened was, we know the story of the incident. If you don't, recommend you go check out the previous podcasts. A huge situation happened, and I was forced to look into myself again. It's brilliant. The last time this happened was about 8 years ago, I guess. 2014, 9 years ago. Gosh darn. That woman's almost about to get married, man. It's hard to believe. But yeah, the last time this happened was about 9 years ago. It wasn't this bad, but I went on this incredible journey of self realization after that. You could argue that my entire journey into the self really took a sharp turn over there. Most of what happened in that particular moment, and this is why I really like being a man, most of that drive came from being rejected in that particular moment, and that's happened again. Yeah, spoiler alert, dude, it did not end well. That's why I'm here recording a podcast, putting out shit on YouTube. You think content people do all this nonsense? Huh? Sorry, man. Just like to joke about that stuff. Once in a while, I use humor as a defense mechanism. I suppose that's what therapists would say. But yeah, the point being that happened, and as a result, I became very indisciplined. It's not a really good excuse. It's not an excuse per se. I'm just stating the fact. As a result of that, I became extremely indisciplined. I didn't go to the gym for nearly 2 weeks. I did work out on an almost daily basis. I did injure my wrist, which is part of the whole reason I didn't go to the gym earlier. But all of this did happen, and I'm only just working on undoing all of those habits, right? And it's good. I'm going to document my process here. I'm going to document whatever's been going on, whatever I'm doing, and hopefully it'll be of some use to some heartbroken kid down in the future. I mean, like, part of the process. Anybody who wants to improve their life, the entire point is I'm finding problems. I have certain problems and I'm trying to solve them on camera, piece by piece. And I'm just documenting it. Every once in a while I make a video about my interests, my things that I've learned, and I am just having fun. Now recently, I was advised to stop the podcast, he said. And this is not the first time I've gotten this advice, by the way. A lot of people have been telling me, what's the point of your YouTube channel, man? What's the point of the podcast? It's just a waste of time. You're wasting your time is what everybody's telling me. But about 7 years ago, when I began my journey in martial arts, a lot of people told me that I was wasting my time. A lot of people told me that this isn't for people like you. Don't do it. You're wasting your time. But I stuck to it, and here I am, capable of teaching people. Granted, I don't do fancy kicks, I don't do stunts, I do the basics, and I know how to fight. I know how to fight, that's the basic, and I'm happy with that. When I was a kid, I had this intense burning desire to learn the way of the sword, to study the blade. I have another poem about that. Maybe I'll eventually reveal it someday. That'll be fun, honestly. That'll be a lot of fun. My point being that I don't want to say something as irresponsible as find something you're passionate about and follow it no matter what else. You do need to be able to eat, and no doubt I do have adequate privilege to be able to follow what I find interesting, right? But it is a great deal of hard work, no doubt. And there's this thing that I'm going to be talking about in a coming video about how I'm not particularly happy about where my art journey is at this particular moment. TLDR, I'm not drawing as much, I'm not studying as much, I'm drawing just enough to keep my skills from deteriorating, and even that I'm beginning to doubt. Maybe my skills have deteriorated, I don't know. I'm not able to practice for more than 20 to 30 minutes a day. It's kind of getting to me. But I do have other spiritual and creative aspects that I'm working on, and it kind of fills the gaping void in my heart. Because let's face it, man, for creators, a lack of creativity is what gets you. It really gets you. It's horrible. But that's how life is. It's a challenge, all of these obstacles. So that's the thing, man. Like, my life is at this particular place, and I'm not particularly content with the situation. I know it could be better. I know I'm not at my peak level. I'm not really satisfied with what I'm doing. Like, for example, I gave you an example of how I'm not happy with the amount of art work that I'm able to produce. I'm not happy with the amount of music practice that I'm able to do. I'm not able to put adequate time into my book. But that's okay, because these are problems, and I'm going to get better and solve my problems. And I'm going to document these issues and how I solve them. So hopefully, even if it doesn't give you a step-by-step process onto solving your own problems, maybe it'll give you a methodology that you can replicate. And that's the goal. Not just to create an army of mini-me's, but to motivate people to think for themselves. That would be really cool. And I'm just going to say this, right? I would rather inspire and lead for people who trust me all the way and who are willing to do the work and who take what I have given them and then start walking their own path. I would rather have that than an army of minions who just follow every order. I mean, it's nice. Actually, I'd take both. I will take both. I'll take it both. Yeah. Just like Tenali Raman, when offered curd and milk and offered wealth and riches beyond measure or intelligence beyond measure, a man couldn't decide and decided to drink both. I'm just like, you know what? I'll just take both, bro. Yeah, that would be amazing. But this is more or less I don't know what this particular podcast is. It began on one particular thing, and it's starting to take shape. Okay, so this is what it is. This particular podcast is a sound out to the universe. It's like those, you know how NASA has these probes, they send out radio signals and they send out satellites into the universe, hoping that some extraterrestrial race would find them, decipher the code, and come back to find us, the source. Right? So this particular episode might be something like that. It is a radio signal sent out into the infinite universe. And this time I'm not hoping. I know that there are going to be people who hear this particular podcast and get back to me. Because they want to learn. The energy in this podcast is different. It's touched on so many superficial topics, but there's so much gold, you could say. Like that poem, man. So full of myself, aren't I? So funny. I'm supposed to be so humble and all of that, but I'm so full of myself. It's fun. Yeah. So, if somebody hears this particular podcast and knows what I'm talking about, who's realized, oh, yes, and wants to be one of the four, well, reach out. You know where to find me. So, that's about it for today's podcast. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. I will see you again next time.